So today, related to the usual Kagyu Malam, we used to give some teachings. First, when we were in Mahayana Hotel, there was a basement in the Mahayana Hotel, a small room or hall. In that is especially for the foreigners from the West. I started to teach there. Then it became a little bit more elaborate, and then we could not accommodate all the people there. Then, uh, then, then we did the teachings in a Taiwanese temple or the hall, which was bigger than that. And that also became too small. And then we shifted to the Sabji Mingyur Rinpoche's monastery in the Tiger Monastery Hall. And that was also mainly for the foreigners. The teachings were given for the foreign students. And then we couldn't accommodate there all the people, so now here all the monks as well as other devotees and all of you have gathered here, so have this opportunity to talk to you, and especially on this occasion we're going to go through the Atish Dipankara Shrijana's The Lamp of the Path to Enlightenment. We made this program because of some reasons. The main reason is the Gambupa, the Nyame Tapolaje, first he entered the Kadampa school and he became a great master of Kadampa. And then after, and then the lineage of practice, special practice with blessings he received from Milarepa, and then he started the merging together of the two rivers of Kadampa and Mahamudra. And his main students were the three men from Kham, and one of them was Karmapa Tusum Chemba. And he was born in Kham Teshut, and at the age of 16, he became a monk. And then Yuen Chuang, like a main student, one of the students of Chobo Rinpoche, Chobochi Padyantisha. And then at the age of 19, he went to Uzang. And at the age of 20, he received teachings from Tulung Jamarwa and Chaba Chuchi Singye. And then he received lots of treatises. Yes. Then Chansong Chembu Sharawa, and then he received Kadampa teachings for 7 years, and Sharawa and others. Then around the age of 30, and then he went to Tapolaje. And then he said he first gave a teaching on Lanam. He said that this is what I practiced and you should also practice this. And then he gave all the teachings, and the Dusam Chamber also did the same practice of Kadampa teachings and Mahamudra teachings merged into one. And this Kamakaju the lineage, the practice, is the one which practices these two main lineages together. And then also in the Gelugpa also, the J. Rinpoche kind of especially holds the lineage of Kadampa teachings. And then he received all the teachings that the J. Rinpoche received all the teachings that was present at that time, and especially he received and studied, practiced the Sawandupa, Guhe Garva. And then he also practiced the J. Rinpoche, the Gelug's tradition also practiced the Kadampa teachings and the Mahamudra teachings together. Yeah, so they are two different lineages of the same kind. So please do the offering for the tea. Tea. The Karmapa Dusam Chamber was born in 1110, and this year is the 900th anniversary of that. So, so this is an occasion. On this occasion, we would like to go through the text that, or the teachings that the Dusam Chamber, the first Karmapa, actually practiced. Generally, I don't know much, but and there's also this, although I don't know much, but we have this, the tradition of practicing Kadampa and Mahamudra merged together. And so I would like to remind you, and I might, any kind of mistakes I make, any kind of commissions and omissions I make, please forgive me. Please do not get angry that I made some kind of mistakes or omissions and commissions. And also, what I teach should not become a cause of negative emotions in you. I will try my best. So you must think properly, and all these activities should not become a cause of negative emotions. And at the same time, if there is something good, something positive, please take them in and try to practice them. And please share this. We need to share these teachings and have to enjoy it together. Actually, the main audience for me today or this time is the people from the Himalayan regions and the general public. My main audience is supposed to be people from Himalayan regions, and especially for the general public. So please take it accordingly. So the the sh- uh, the Shantideva, the great Bodhisattva Shantideva said, the human precious life is so difficult to get, and if you don't make use of it this time, you may not get it again. So the first line that this the great, the precious human being is very difficult to attain. So it is not enough that you have to understand it intellectually, but you need to take it into your heart that that we have received this precious human life once, and it is not easy to get again and again. It's difficult to attain because of the causes, because of the examples, and because of many other reasons, or the so we need to remind ourselves and think how difficult it is to find this great precious life. But people might think that there is a kind of overpopulation happening in the world. How can it be so difficult to get? But just being many people or many human beings, the more population, it's difficult. It's not difficult to get a human life. It's not that there are lots of human beings on this earth. So main thing is that this precious human life, it's not just human life, but the precious human life we received because we did lots of positive deeds in the past. And so even now, I mean, to abide by just one kind of positive deed or one vow is very difficult. So therefore, we can imagine how difficult it is to be able to remain in a good kind of conduct all the time. And then it says, "Shibu Tundrup Thoba Chubala" means Chibu means a kind of gentle person or gentleman, a good person, as a kind of somebody who is kind of a Chibu means like somebody who is who has some is a powerful person. A powerful person is I've seen a photo earlier. There was in one foreign country there was a big fish, dolphin maybe, dolphin, dolphin, dolphin. they kill that, uh, hitting them with so many of them they killed that the part of the, you know, the sea became red. Then there, you know, it seems that people think that somebody who can kill this fish is very kind of good, you know, very courageous. It's not, but we don't see it like that. Somebody who has power or who has ability is someone who has ability or who has the power is that within this lifetime or with this life, if we can attain or if we can make some ways to attain a good life in the future, in the next life, like a heavenly life or a very kind of a nice human life, if that is possible to do, then you have the power, a powerful or gentle or good life or a human being. So if you have that kind of so we need to understand and appreciate that this human life is so important, and if we don't appreciate that, then we will misuse this life, and we will waste this life. So therefore, we need to appreciate this. The, the sun is becoming hotter and hotter. When they made this this planning, they never thought about me, I think. then, then tomorrow I will become like a Bihari. Then I can say that I am a Bihari. That's very good. I will become a Bihari. And the next two lines, it's not just temporary well-being. Like we have something to eat and we have something, you know, some enjoyment of the life and some good name or something like, not that, but that will, something that will bring permanent well-being. As they say that if you have the precious jewel, then you don't understand the preciousness of it, and then when you lose it, then you feel regret for it. It's not like that. We should not do like this. Even if we can't do too many others, so we have to really think about and appreciate this human life, especially if you kind of look from the scientific point of view. That human beings have this intelligence which could, see what is good and what is not good, what is right and what is not right. Yeah. They have this distinctive or distinguishing power, discerning power. We have the discerning power. So far, we have used it only for my own sake, that discerning power. And some people use it for your own friends or for your own family and relatives. If you look from another point of view, for me and myself, lots of beings get harmed. Like if we are eating meat, then many other beings get killed, like chickens and pork and beef and they have to suffer a lot. They have to give their life. Therefore, to so we don't know we don't extend that our discernment of what's good and not to other beings. What is what I can do to make them benefit to them, and what I do that harms them. So we don't think, we don't have put our discernment on that. So our way of thinking is very small. So if we can extend that discernment power, then not just sometimes we say that for the benefit of beings as vast as this space, then sometimes it's too kind of maybe too big to say, and then maybe there's nothing kind of concrete there, too big kind of. But if you can think more practically, like all the people on this world, for that, what can I do? What can I not do? What can I, stop doing things? Then, then that we can kind of have our discernment and our intelligence become something meaningful, something useful. Just becoming a human being, and then if you just live our life as we used to do, and sometimes then I feel whether this intelligence is better to have or not, better not to have. Sometimes maybe it's better not to have that. And therefore, if we can look, we can say that human beings may be 100 times and 100,000 times more dangerous than like tigers and bears and things like that. Although they are supposed to be fierce, but we are more dangerous than them. Look at the world, all these wars. All these diseases, many diseases that and other problems that human beings have created. So the human beings, in one way, are very dangerous. So if we don't kind of direct our way of thinking, our intellect into the right way, then it can become very dangerous. It's dangerous for the world and for all the beings living on this earth. So each and every one of us have to think carefully and in a kind of a bigger way. And that's the main point I want to talk. Especially we are supposed to be Dharma practitioners. We also take the name of a Buddhist, claim to be Buddhist. Especially we also claim to be a Mahayana and following the Vajrayana practice. It's not just that it's not enough. We have some kind of a devotion or faith in our lineage or in our practice. So if we kind of say we just claim to be Buddhist, but then what is that which is kind of distinguishing that we are Buddhist? What is what is different, what is more that as a Buddhist, what we are doing. We don't have any characteristic of a Buddhist. We don't practice the teachings of the Buddhist. Then it's no difference whether we are Buddhist or not Buddhist. The main reason why this happens is because as a human being, we need to know what are the responsibilities we have. And if we don't know this, what is the main responsibilities that we have, that is what we have, that's the problem. So we need to understand what I have to do, and what is the important thing. When we talk about the 4 ways to turn your mind to the Dhamma, it's because, they don't say that you have to have faith right from the beginning. First, you say in this that you have to appreciate the preciousness of the human being and what benefits and what harm you do. So these are the starting point of the Dharma. What positive deeds we do, what practice we do, we need, if we don't, the reason why we don't advance in our practice is because we don't have this kind of a basic understanding, basic kind of basic understanding and experience of the precious human life. So we need to recite this, remind ourselves this shloka, this stanza many times, 100 times maybe a day, so that it really seeps in, it really integrates ourselves. Then we need to kind of practice it, and then this will bring. If that is not there, then there is no base. Just saying I would attain the Vajradhara. First, we have to become a good person, good human being. If you can't even become a better human being or good human being, how can you become Vajradhara? The responsibility. So we have to take the responsibility of becoming a good person. As Nagarjuna said, we have to start, or we have to step by step take the boat of a human life, and then slowly cross the ocean. If that happens, then all our purpose will be accomplished. Otherwise, not. So then we receive this precious human life that is difficult to get. Now, how to get the meaning out of it, get the benefit out of this life, how to make this useful, and how to take the essence of this. To make it meaningful, to make this life meaningful, at least we have to create causes so that in next life we have a good life of human or heavenly life. So how to do that? We have to practice the 10 positive deeds, because by doing positive, then there will be good result, or the happiness. the positive deeds brings more happiness. Because we want happiness in the future, we need to do more positive actions. When we say positive deeds or Kalyan or the 10 practices or whatever, it's not that all the practices need to be 10 practices or whatever. Like saying like not to kill, for instance. So here, refraining from doing negative things is the positive. So like we, with intention of killing to kill somebody is very bad. So therefore we try to stop that. The positive deed is, first is that we change our mind. We kind of, we transform our mind, bring peace in the mind, that we don't allow our mind to be overpowered by negative emotions. That's most important. It's not just that we kind of pretend to act in a good way or a kind of a kind way and say, it's not just that, but our way of thinking, the mind has to be transformed. So first we have to think. We have to and so therefore we have to change our way of thinking. That's why the Dharma, the Chu, how to change our mind. Therefore we have to practice. To practice Dharma, we have to understand the Dharma, the path. If you don't understand the stages of path, everybody has different ways of being, different abilities, different state of mind. So we need to practice accordingly, according to what stage we are, according to the way we are. Like for instance, these days, lots of things are happening. The graded path. Yeah. Before we understand anything, the basics, then receiving Vajrayana teachings, first becoming like very faithful and kind of, but slowly lots of other problems come up. But if they are taught gradually and step by step, then it becomes very stable and good. Especially the sadhanas or all these practices of Vajrayana and all the prostrations and circumambulation and all other practices. If you don't, although these are all practices, but if you don't know how to do that, then you just kind of imitate others, but then it doesn't become the real Dharma practice, because you just do as others are doing and you don't understand exactly why you are doing this. So then it just doesn't transform your mind. Like Nagarjuna and Asanga's traditions, then this Atisha Dipankara's teachings, which is coming to us through many great masters of Tibet. The teaching by Atisha Dipankara, this we have to understand and study. Vikramashila's system of teaching. The first to talk about the teacher, to understand the importance of the. Then the first the author. Who is the author? The author's kind of greatness of the author we have to talk about first. There are three things. The Atisha Dipankara was born in the Bengal, maybe now in Bangladesh. I can't say exactly where, but he was born in Bengal in a Kshatriya, the warriors' family. He became a great master, very highly realized being. His most inspiring action was that he came to Tibet and he turned the wheel of Dharma in Tibet of the very deep as well as the vast teachings. And especially he wrote this book, Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment in Tibet. And so therefore it became, so therefore the Lamrim teachings, the Lamrim teachings which is taught in all the schools of Buddhism have happened because of he writing this book. Atish Dipankara writing this book. And the Nakso Losava says, he said that if the Cho Rinpoche, Cho Patisha didn't come to Tibet, then the whole Tibet will become like a blind. Before that, they were practicing Vajrayana in a very strange way, and also the Sutrayana, there were translations and there were some small notes, but there was no real, oral teachings. So therefore, he was brought to Tibet by Shangchupu with great courage and with great sacrifice, and he brought him. The Shangchupu brought Atish Dipankara to Tibet. Generally, Indian masters are very kind and very beneficial to Tibet, and especially Atish Dipankara his kindness is immeasurable for Tibet, especially the Kagyu and especially the Karma Kagyu. We have to think and feel gratitude towards the Atish Dipankara. We really have to feel from the depth of our heart the gratitude that we feel towards. And then second is about the teaching. What is the teaching about? What's the importance of the teaching? That's the second important thing. Atisha, he was thinking very deep and kind of a lot ahead. He was never like a sectarian, and he was in. So all these schools were present in the Vikramashila, and all different schools of thoughts asked him to become, their kind of leader. When Atisha came to Tibet, he told Damtemba, and he told them that there are 4 schools of Tibet, of Vinaya in India. So I belong to one, and there are others also. So you should bring them, and also, you know, you should bring them all and establish them in Tibet. At that time in Tibet, there were so many different things going on in Tibet. There's so many different Vajrayana things. And then at that time, the Domtempa thought that there are too many schools, too many things happening in Tibet, so it's not good to bring more. Also, they thought that in Tibet, there were only one school of Vinaya, but he wanted all four schools. But then the Tibetans thought that if there are too many different lineages, then there will be kind of conflict and it will be not good. So they just had only one. But the main understanding of Atish Dipankara is that not to have this sectarian feeling, and try to take all the different teachings and different lineages with respect. So he was kind of practicing, and he was accepting, and he understood all different schools and all different yanas and all different kind of lineages. He knew them, and he kind of accepted them and respected them. And especially, there are two Mahayana kind of schools of Nagarjuna and Asanga. There are two. And the Atish Dipankara. So he took both these he practiced these two as as one, and kind of kept the lineage of both, but taught that they are not different, or they don't contradict anything. So he kind of brought great harmony into these practices. Like one of the students of Sharava, the Sharava wrote that he from the teachings of the Atisha Dipankara, he kind of brought together these two systems of Nagarjuna and Asanga as one, or as similar, or together. He wrote something in Toding Kicholakong. He gave some teachings on this, but later on things were added also by one of his students called Sharava. And the main thing is that the teaching is about the three different levels of different types of people, and it also teaches the Sutrayana as well as Vajrayana. So in this short book, everything is included. So through this book, you can understand, or through this book, you can put all the different teachings and different sutras and tantras into place. If you really practice this graded path, then you understand almost everything, and all the teachings of the Buddha can be understood and placed in your practice. So usually there are four different importance, but that we will talk later on. So now, thirdly, how to listen to these teachings and how to teach this. So first, those who are listening to the teaching, first you have to take care of the way to listen, to kind of three poisons and others, like the way you look at the teacher, how you act yourself. There are many, many things, but I don't want. It's not just that we have too much time and to kill the time. It's just not, we have to teach, we have to, whether you listen or not, because this is just the system or this is just the tradition. It's not like that. It's not useful. It's also wrong from the side of the listener, and also it's wrong from the speaker's point of view. The listeners has to listen because we want to listen. Like if somebody is very thirsty, that your throat becomes dry, and then you are about to get water, and then you really, then you just kind of, you hold some. If somebody is totally full, completely eaten just now, and then please eat more and please eat more, it's not like that. The teaching should not be received like that. Some people think that I already know all the Dharma. I have received teachings. I have, so I understand everything. But just to, for fun, I will go and listen also. So if that is not good, that's not, because you come with, your mind filled with pride and, arrogance, then you don't need to receive these teachings. The teacher, even if you have lots of negative emotions and you have lots of faults, you don't understand the meaning of the teaching, you don't have any practice, even if the teacher is like that, if the teaching is the teaching of the Buddha, the commentaries by great masters of Tibet or India, that's the kind of pure teaching. Then if that is, even if the teacher is not good, if the teaching is okay, that's enough, that's good. Sometimes the good advice comes from kind of useless people. So it can be useful, it can be beneficial. So therefore, there are many different ways of, good ways of teaching. There are many things. What I think is, what I understand is, first, I need to teach what goes directly to your heart, or that is inspiring you directly. It's not that I want to try to look very learned, or it's not to, I also don't know these things, but it may not, it will not be useful. So it's something that is really useful and helpful to the people, that I should think like that. Sometimes I don't understand. I don't understand too many things, but I have lots of quotations, to show that I have studied them. That's not the way. There's some like that. So there are some books made of all the quotations. So you don't need to, teach all the, you don't need to study all the text, but just the quotations. You don't need to, just the quotations, just memorize some of these quotations, and then you give these quotations, and then people think that you are very learned. A few conferences I've been to, so I try to try to get. So they just studied these small papers which had lots of quotations and then used that and not actually studying the real text. So I think it's not very useful to make lots of quotations from different sources. So I think the main thing is that to only few that I really understand or kind of moves me. Generally, what I think is that somebody who is like me, who can really use it in their life, in their practice, I feel that if I can talk more about this, it will be useful. If I talk about lots of things which people cannot practice, then it's not very useful. Therefore, the teaching of the Dharma is, it's not about disputes, it's not about, it's something that is to practice. It's about the practice, it's about, all the teachings are about how to practice, how to transform yourself. So all these teachings, even if we understand one point, it has to something help ourselves. Even if I receive just one session, one teaching, it is something we have to use it, something that could help us. It's not that you have to listen all the time to me, so you have to just think yourself. First, I have to think myself. I have to think and see that this I would like to practice. So because you are in this kind of class or the session, then your mind should also turn towards the Dharma and see how best you can help yourself. Generally, the general introduction and then the actual practice, actual kind of teachings, and then the specific teachings of the text. The first, the Buddha Shakyamuni. According to the Sravakayana, he practiced for 100 kalpas, and according to the Mahayana, he practiced countless millions practiced, and then whatever may be, he went to Buddha Gaya. And became enlightened, and then he became enlightened in Buddha Gaya, and he taught the right way to all the people. So all his actions, right from the beginning, he's generating the bodhicitta, was also for the benefit of other people. And then in between, he practiced the two accumulations. And that was also for for all the sentient beings. Now the the umbrella is becoming better and better, while my teaching is becoming worse and worse. Although the umbrella is very beautiful, it may not be very useful for me. To accumulate of this accumulation of two accumulations also, I once thought like this. Sometimes we think about the four schools, like four philosophical schools of Buddhism, and also so we study in the many different. Also, we study a little bit about the other other schools like Indians. So we just teach them. So usually, we study the other Indian language teachings. That's it's not nothing wrong with it. We study four different schools of thought in Buddhism. That's also no problem. But sometimes, in Tibetan Buddhism, if we study other schools of Tibetan Buddhism, then it is sometimes regarded not so good. That's really strange. That's not right. We are trying to become enlightened. We are searching for the wisdom. We are searching for wisdom that will bring us out of the ignorance. We are not talking about Buddhism, not Buddhist, what is Burnpos or the Buddhist or the Kajus and Nyingma Sakya. Anything that is the teaching that is very useful and that's very kind of establish something good, we throw it away like the grass in front of the meat-eating animals. That's not good. The Buddha Shakyamuni, he accumulated the two accumulations for 3 countless eons because he wanted to help all the sentient beings. So, just to understand, it's not necessary to accumulate for so long. So therefore, all these things is for this benefit of the people and all different kinds of people. So this is something very important. So when Buddha becomes enlightened, it's also for other people. For some Kadampas say that our samsara is a small samsara. The Buddha's samsara is the big samsara. Every being every being has the opportunity to become enlightened. So therefore, Buddha is constantly in samsara because he's always helping people, and there's no end to it. So Buddha is there's no Buddha which is always in the kind of a peaceful way. So he always has to work for the people or the beings. So whatever different kind of beings he's helping, it's there is no end to it. There is no, it's totally, the samsara is the office of the Buddha, his field of work. He never goes out of that samsara. So there is nothing of the Buddha which is not for the benefit of the people or for the people. So all the teachings that he gave after he became enlightened also is for the other people, for the people. So there is no other way, there is no other way. Even if he's not thinking that I must do this for the sake of others, but because he was so accustomed to think and to work and to, to dedicate for the well-being of other people, that even he has no consciousness of doing this, or he has no more kind of what kind of intention to do that, it has to happen like that. So therefore, so there are two things. The working for the benefit of beings for the time being, temporarily, and working for the beings in a kind of for the lasting way or the permanent way. So if there is somebody who is only believes in this life and nothing more, so a bodhisattva should help them also for this life. So bodhisattva should help these people for this life only, because he's only thinking about this life and he's not worried or he's not thinking about other lives. So therefore, bodhisattva should help him in this life. So if somebody wants to, work for the benefit of next life, then of course the bodhisattvas should help in that way. So when we talk about the three levels of people in Lamrim, there are two. The small kind of, the first level of beings are two. One is that only thinking about this life, that's not about the Dharma. There is no Dharma there. Only thinking about the welfare of this life, so that's not. So in this, somebody who is thinking about the next life and how to be born, there then the Dharma is taught. Who is practicing through Dharma. So, from that point of view, then we talk about these three levels. So the second part of the small mind people is those who want to work for the good benefit or the good life in the next lives. So we have to think what we are, or where we are, and at what stage we are. That's very, very important. The Kadampa Devachan said, they are not like, there's no like the difference of the depth in the Dharma. There's no difference of depth in Dharma. There's the difference of depth in our mind. So sometimes we think that if there is a deep teaching is given, then the person will become deep and profound. But there's some people think that we will only kind of practice the deep teachings, the profound teachings like Mahamudra and things like that, and that's not enough. There is no. We are very, we are always interested in kind of nothingness, shunyata or emptiness and all sorts of things. But they said that the Dharma Dzogpa Chenpo is not enough. The person has to be Dzogpa Chenpo. The Dharma Dzogpa Chenpo is Dzogpa Chenpo. It's always like that. It doesn't become better if you teach that, or if you don't teach it. what we have to teach or what we have to practice is that the person, the people, we need to improve and we have to become Dzogpa Chembor. We need to become, you know, deep. The Dharma itself, you know, Dharma teaching doesn't, teaching is deep doesn't make you deep. So first we just, you know, practice what is supposed to be profound, just, you know, closing our eyes. It's not that we cannot practice them, that's okay. But we have to really think where we are, how much we understand. That's the important thing. Whether this is the right time for me to practice this profound. I'm not saying that you cannot practice Vajrayana or you cannot practice Mahamudra, but you have to see where you are. You have to see whether it's the right time for you to do this or not. Some kind of very, you know, how do you call that? Yeah, some people do the tightrope walking, you know, who are very, what do you call it? Very skillful in this. But if you try to do that, then you are about to go to see the Yamaraja. The same. So in the same way, you know, any kind of teachings or any kind of practices or training, you have to go like that, you know, step by step. You can't just jump into the. So you have to turn in towards yourself and see where you are. It's not, otherwise it's not useful. So just saying that I'm Mahayana, I'm really great, something like that. Or if you kill, then say, I do it for the benefit of others. Or then, you know, sometimes because of the Dhamma, you know, the whole Dhamma, then I am kind of killing this, who has this 10 qualities or something like that. These are not right. If you do something that is with complete pure motivation and with really not helping others, not kind of harming others, then maybe there's some other positive some things you can do which is seemingly not positive in the action, but these things we have to really turn into ourselves and then understand. So there are two levels of. One is to become better lives in the samsara, and then the ultimate kind of is liberation is to become liberated from samsara. So the people who want to do that is the middling kind of, a middle kind of type of people. So the middle type of people are all the samsara. You see the suffering of the samsara. All the samsara, everywhere, wherever you are, brings unhappiness or disturbance. So therefore, you really want to, cross the samsara or liberated from the samsara. And then Namchen, to become enlightened. So Buddhahood through Mahayana way and Buddhahood through Vajrayana way. And these both is the kind of great beings. Great beings are one who is totally, everything is doing through, because of compassion. Everything is under the control of great compassion. Want to eliminate the suffering of all the beings. That's the general, Mahayana. Especially if you talk from the point of view of Vajrayana, then in order to bring all the sentient beings in this lifetime or too quickly become liberated from samsara, I want to do that. When you say quickly, there's some importance. So it gives me some kind of important, special feeling when we think, how problematic it is, how much suffering to all the beings. So then you sometimes feel that yes, I must do it very quickly. I must do something urgently. I feel like that. Like if you are in a fire, if you are within the kind of something a fire, then you cannot stay there peacefully for one moment. You have to immediately get out. In the same way, when you feel the sufferings of the samsara and the other beings, all the other beings, then you need to do something now urgently. There's no time, there's no time to relax. This we have to. So this is important. Otherwise, you just say that the Vajrayana is easy. We have to do it quickly, so it will be quick. It's very easy. So therefore, maybe it's good to do that. It's not just like that. That's more like your own sake. Thinking about your own. Doing something for yourself. It's not that. That's not the Vajrayana way of thinking. By practicing Vajrayana, maybe I should not say this. I will not say this. Too much talking is not good. When we think about the Jetsu Milarepa's life, he became enlightened in one lifetime. He requested Marpa because he requested this not because he was in a kind of a leisurely or he requested this because he had so much problems. Slowly, we have there was a king called Galenu who became the king of the country, then the king of all the world, and the king of even the. Then, of course, but it's not like that. The Milarepa is in desperation. He killed so many people. He did so many negative things. So if he thought that if I don't get something really strong this life, then I'm sure to go into helldom or something negative next life. So he was in a very desperate situation. That there's no time. So something I have to do now in this life, this moment. Otherwise, it will be useless for me. So that is the type of way of thinking. It should not be like everything will be easy. We have to do it quickly but easily, like a king. Everything just goes automatically. That's not the way. That's also the same way about the great compassion. That's a quotation from why this Mahayana is so important and so high and so great. It's just because of the compassion. Because of the great compassion, it becomes the great vehicle. It becomes Mahayana. Because it's a great compassion. If there is no great compassion, there is no great Mahayana. It's not only for your own sake. It's only for responsibility for yourself. But sometimes the example is like the goat and the elephant. The goat is quite strong, but is small, so therefore you cannot put lots of things on it, responsible. So therefore it is not about, this is the Mahayana is good and Hinayana is bad, but it's about yourself, how big your compassion is, how much responsibilities you can take in order to help how many people and want to help other people. And that is in your own thoughts. How much responsibility can I take responsibility for one person, for many people? Whether you call it, whether if you are able to take responsible for others, then whether you call yourself Mahayana or not Mahayana, you are Mahayana. So if you can't do that, even if you are only doing it for yourself, then whether you call yourself a great vehicle or Mahayana or the greatest Yana, it's you are the lowest of lower, smallest, smaller Yana. So it's just the compassion. So the compassion is thinking about the people, beings who are suffering, and then really want to liberate them from this suffering. But this compassion doesn't come, just please come, compassion. Now it's Vajrasamaya, you say the mantra, that will not come. That will not make your compassion arise. This is something that you have to do every day, and the way you think, these people who have suffering, who are having problems. In Bodh Gaya also, there are so many poor people, so many people who have no hands or legs, or have nothing to eat, or who have a problem of health. All these problems, they have lots of problems. But if we really feel compassion to them, then because of them, we get something good also. We cannot give too much to them. We may be not able to help them. Sometimes it is maybe dangerous to try to give something also. But if we really care, if we really feel, and if we really feel the compassion towards them and all others, then that's the compassion is arising in us. So it helps us to bring compassion. It is said in Dodejen, there are 10 different things talked about. The enemies, the burning enemies, he says. The real enemy is our negative emotions. So our real enemy never helps us. Always harm us. So we are under the control of that enemy that is always harming us. So when we think like that, then so once we are in lots of suffering, then not only that, first of course we have the intention wanting to get rid of that suffering, but once when that suffering becomes too much, then we even kind of lose that hope to get out of that suffering. So that we have to think about them. We have to think about them. So people like the darkness, we have to think about the people in the darkness. Like If it is totally darkness, there's no light, then all these beings when we have no light for some time, we feel so bad. So all these sentient beings, for kalpas after kalpa, for endlessly, they don't understand. They are in ignorance. They are in darkness. So think about that. So the compassion, we have to think from many different sides, many different angles. So this compassion we need to arise, not just like thoughts, not just like talking, but something that comes from your heart, from the from your deep depth, from your bones. Then you become the follower of Mahayana. So these three types of beings, this the category, it's coming from the according to some, it is written by the Maitreya, or it's whether it's coming from Maitreya or from Asanga, whatever. These three types of beings. So sometimes it's said that although there are three types, the three types are also part of the Mahayana type, because it's a kind of the stages. There's some who kind of directly become, directly experienced. It's not that they don't have to. These people who have this spontaneous experience, it's not that they don't have to practice. They just, when the teacher gives instruction, then they immediately understand and then use it. But everybody has to practice step by step. Generally speaking, the first Purusha, small Purusha, and the middle Purusha practices are very important, because it's it's the stages of the Mahayana. So it's not something you have to give up. You have to kind of look down. These are all part of one thing. So the main thing is the aspiration. So first is only thinking about yourself. So I only want to think only about this life. Then second is I think about the next life, good next life. And third is that I want to become arhat, or liberated from samsara. That's for me. This thinking about me. And the fourth is I want to become enlightened, and I want to become enlightened because I want to help all sentient beings. These four different kind of levels of intentions or aspirations. And that is the Mahayana. So this the Hinayana, or the lesser vehicle, is like the preliminaries, or the first stages. Then the Mahayana is the actual the second stage, or the higher stage. So there, first we have to go step by step like this, and then become enlightened. Then generate the bodhicitta. So the bodhicitta, generating bodhicitta, is important. So once this bodhicitta arises in you, then you can be called a bodhisattva. Then you have the name of a bodhisattva. And that person, that life, is entered into the Mahayana, or the bodhisattva. If you give up this bodhicitta, So there are many different, kind of vows of bodhisattva, but the main vow is to give up sentient beings. So if somebody completely gives up the benefit of one person, then you lose the bodhicitta. If there is, what I mean to say is that if there is a chance, if you think, if I feel that even if I have the chance to help this person in future, I will never help. If I have the chance to, to help him when he's in big trouble, I will never help him. So when that kind of intention happens, then you give up this person. So anybody who want to enter into the Mahayana, one has to practice the Bodhisattva Yana, and that Bodhisattva Yana or the Bodhicitta has to happen, has to arising because of many causes and conditions. So therefore, in order to, first we have to understand what is the benefit of generating this bodhicitta. What is the benefits? What is the use of generating bodhicitta? This we have to understand. First, we have to think. We have to understand. All the Buddha teachings is about, the deep. We have to think. We have to understand. There is lots of levels of. That's why it is difficult to practice, because we have to understand. Because the teachings of the Buddha is very deep and very vast. Therefore, it is. Sometimes people say that why there's not so many Buddhists, why there are less number of Buddhists. It's because it's very, it's very difficult. It's very something that you have to study and understand deeply. That's why. And some people who want to practice Buddhism and who has to, who wants to kind of study it also, it is not easy. You have to understand. You have to understand lots of things. It's not just a faith. You have to see clearly. You have to understand. So you have to go deeply into it. So therefore, it's not easy. So we most people need something that is very simple and you just reach out and you get it. It's not like that. If Duk falls down, it will be very difficult for me. So when we look at the benefit, then there are two benefits. One is for the temporary and for the permanent. The first is that don't bring it back. I will fight. When we were in Tibet, we always try to stay in the. Some doctors told me that you have less vitamin B, so you need some sun. So if you have the bodhicitta, then you will not be reborn into negative realms. All this karma to be born into negative or the lower realms is completely exhausted, and you will not accumulate any more negative karma to be born into the lower realms. So all the causes and conditions to be born into lower realms will be completely eliminated. So that's the temporary benefit. And then the ultimate, you become enlightened. You fully enlightened like Buddhahood very quickly or easily. So therefore that's the permanent benefit. First, you need to have the intention to attain this temporary and ultimate result. So you need to understand this. First, to understand the benefit is very important. And then first you have to understand the benefits, and then you have to really attain these benefits for you and for others. So that's very important. So, you know, whether something is precious or not also depends on how you see it. So if you see something, you know, if you kind of have a good, precious intention, so if you have a good, bad intention, and then the result will also be not so useful. First, we have to think about two things. One is that you have to understand the benefit of the higher realms and benefit of enlightenment or liberation. If you don't understand that, then you cannot understand the benefit of these two benefits we talked about. And you must have the intention, or you must have the so the first, the main causes of bodhicitta is the loving kindness and compassion, and the compassion is the most important. So therefore, you have to see how suffering the samsara is, how much everybody wants to be free from the suffering, and then how much you want them to be free from suffering. You know, the really deep you have to feel, and when you feel that, then you will understand the benefit of you know, freeing from that suffering. And so it's said that first you have to think about your own self, you know, your own body. Everybody thinking about taking the example of yourself, then you should not harm others. So the compassion actually starts from yourself. If I have some problems, how much I don't like it, how much I want to be free from that, you know. So if I have a little bit of or more happiness or enjoyment, I want more and more. I'm not satisfied with a little happiness or a little well-being. I want the kind of limitless well-being. So like myself, everybody wants that. So things like that. So it's not that, you know, it's not like I here and everybody there, and then I think about them, oh, I'm compassionate to them. It's not like that. You have to, because when you see people who are suffering, I have to think, if I am in that situation, how I would feel. I have to think like that. How much I would like to free from this, and then only you feel. Then it's kind of, that is the one who is the problem. You know, he doesn't have hands. He's blind. You know, it's like that. That's like that. And you know, you cannot generate compassion like that. You have to generate real compassion. You have to take on. You know, you have to feel yourself in that place, in that person's situation, and then feel it. In the world, there are lots of different religions, spiritual, many different people, many different cultures, civilizations, different history. many, but all of us under one sun and one moon, on one earth, we breathe the same air, oxygen, same oxygen we use. So we are like the same family. So we have to feel the, the, the suffering and happiness. If we have suffering, we have to carry it together. If we have a good time, we have to share together. If I have happiness, may this happiness be shared by everybody. If I have suffering, may I be able to, carry this on myself. It's not that if I'm happy, then I carry it on myself. But if I have suffering, then I share it to others. It's not like that. It should not be like that. Once I used to think like this. I can think. Once a group from Afghanistan came to see me. Afghanistan. There was one, this Bamiyan Buddha. Yeah. Bamiyan. No. There's a big kind of Bamiyan Buddha. It was destroyed. The people were from there. The big group. They were talking about they have lots of problems. I told them this. You have destroyed the Buddha image, but I don't. In one way, it's good. The Muslims think that there is no form, that the God has no form. They feel very bad if we make some form. So that form becomes an obstacle. So that's very good that it is destroyed, because that is the kind of problem between us, that they don't want this form. Generally, from Buddhist point of view, to destroy the Buddha image is very bad. But if you really think deeply, this Buddha image maybe have been the like obstruction between bringing together the Muslims and the Buddhist way of thinking. So it's okay. Generally speaking, there are lots of things in the society, there are different. There are lots of kind of different things, but all these differences and conflicts, in front of compassion and compassion and bodhicitta, all this becomes very small, and it doesn't, really can stand. So therefore, when you have this, bodhicitta and compassion, then all the divisions and problems and disharmony are totally kind of eliminated.